Good morning and welcome to Arctic Futures 2050. I'm Brendan Kelly, Conference Chair and the Director of the Study of Environmental Arctic Change, or SEARCH. This conference will be forward-looking, but often forward-looking benefits from looking back as well. So let me, if I find my clicker here, let me take you back a few decades to a time when the polar sea was a spry young icebreaker and there was plenty of reliable ice in the winter and spring in the Bering Sea. So it was 1978, and I had the great fortune to spend a couple of months at sea with Konrad Oziva studying the sea ice ecosystem. Konrad was a very knowledgeable hunter from St. Lawrence Island. And learning in the field, of course, is about as rich an experience as a biologist can have. But another way to learn is to, let me just say that in addition to learning from Konrad, I also had the great honor of learning from people like Nathan and Chester Nungwuk, Bud Fay, Jimmy Memorana, Alex Akia, and others. But another great way to learn is to teach with other instructors. And some years after Konrad and I were on the polar sea together, he and several elders and I co-taught a field ecology course on St. Lawrence Island. Camped in the tundra, we were immersed in the ecosystem. But on the first morning, a student from Savunga confessed that he felt torn. He said, I really like my science classes, and I like learning from the elders, and I don't know which to choose. Well, Konrad very calmly said, you don't need to choose. You can learn what you need from both knowledge systems. And Konrad went on to describe his own experiences learning about the ecosystems from his elders and learning about the geology of the island from scientists that he had guided. Well, indeed, Konrad and Eleanor Oziva, Mabel Tooley, and other elders knew so much about the ecology of the island and its geology that I, for the most part, was more student than instructor. And so again today, I find myself surrounded by experts willing to share what they know and to learn from different knowledge systems, albeit in this quite different tent. So who are we, and why are we here in this tent? Well, we are Yupik, Inuit, Sami, Aleut, Athabaskan, Tlingit, Haida, Europeans, and Asians. We are 400 people from 17 countries, and we are elders and we are young people. And that kind of ethnic, political, and demographic diversity is challenging. We don't all see the world the same way. We don't talk about it the same way. And those differences can easily lead to misunderstanding and conflict. And yet, at exactly the same time, those differences are very essential to why we are here together. We need to bring together the wisdom in this room to understand and respond to the rapid changes that are taking place in the Arctic. So I suggest that we might start by recognizing two values that in fact unite us. The first is we care about others, including those who will come after us. And therefore, we care about a sustainable Arctic environment. And we all contribute to a sustainable Arctic in our own ways. Many in the room do the very hard work of governing, making policies at the village level, at cities, states, provinces, federal governments, and international bodies. The success of those policies, however, depends on being well informed by what we know about the topics. Fortunately, we increasingly have political leaders who understand and appreciate the importance of informing policy with knowledge For example, Senator Lisa Murkowski.
Hello and welcome to the Arctic Futures 2050 conference. Many thanks to Search and Dr. Brendan Kelly for convening this meeting and for inviting me to be able to speak. I'm sorry that I can't be with you in person, but I am working at home in Alaska, and that's really where I want to be. So thank you for the opportunity, though, to express my support for this gathering and the work that you are doing. Now is the time to decide what future the Arctic will have and how we ensure that future is vibrant, secure, and sustainable, and that this future is built with the knowledge and vision of Arctic residents, policymakers, Indigenous leaders, and our most innovative thinkers. We all know that the North is undergoing rapid environmental change. I certainly see the effects of climate change in Alaska firsthand. We're facing challenges ranging from coastal erosion and impacts to marine life to droughts and permafrost thaw. Diminishing sea ice is affecting critical food resources in subsistence communities. And new issues are arising as maritime traffic inevitably pushes further north. Many countries, both Arctic and non-Arctic, are looking north and seeing new opportunities, whether we like it or not. So how are we as policymakers engaging with effective, meaningful proposals to support our Arctic priorities? The answer, of course, begins with information. We need insight on what is happening and how to address priority needs on the ground. We need to support scientists so that they can collect this information. We need to hear and to take to heart local Indigenous voices. The knowledge of the people that live in the Arctic is invaluable to understanding the region and its dynamics, and it must be regarded as a source of critical information. I'm very grateful for the insights that are shared by Alaska Native and Indigenous communities as we confront new environmental and societal issues in the high north and really around the world. And I thank those who've come here from Alaska and the Arctic to share knowledge about your home. Know that we need it. This past spring, I was able to introduce legislation to reconstitute the Arctic Executive Steering Committee and develop clear channels for the people of the Arctic to have a voice in federal science and policy development. The legislation also updates the Arctic Research and Policy Act of 1984 to include more Native voices at the U.S. Arctic Research Commission, strengthening traditional knowledge and community coordination in our nation's scientific efforts in the Arctic, especially our efforts to study and understand climate change, build resilience at the local level, and adapt in ways that safeguard food and energy security for communities. We lawmakers also must stay engaged with the scientific community. And this means taking the cutting-edge science into account when proposing policy solutions and being attuned to where federal investment in research is needed most. Bottom line, we have to commit robust and continued funding to Arctic science. I've been supporting federal Arctic science across multiple agencies through my role on the Appropriations Committee, from NOAA's work to understand fish stocks that are moving north, to the Arctic research that NASA and NSF support in partnership with the University of Alaska system. We need to be in dialogue with experts from many fields, climatologists, oceanographers, economists, biologists, along with local Indigenous partners to make headway on Arctic challenges, working together. Arctic change is a global challenge that requires collaboration across borders between nations, cultures, and fields of experience. And this room spans those borders and gives me hope. I expect that the dialogue between Arctic residents, scientists, and policymakers here will have greater positive impacts than we can predict. Several members of my staff are there at the conference, and I would urge you to reach out to them with your ideas and messages for how I can best support the Arctic future that we all hope for. Thank you again for your work towards making this the future that we can achieve. Take care.
Well, Search and our partners agree with the Senator that Arctic change is a global challenge that requires collaboration across borders. And here in this tent, we span those borders. Together, we have tremendous knowledge of policymaking and the Arctic environment, past and present. But we also need predictions about the future environment, the environment that we want to sustain our children and grandchildren. We have the opportunity then to combine the expertise in this tent in service of our shared value of a sustainable Arctic. And that, by the way, is the actual meaning of the word conference. The roots literally mean to carry forward together. Well, I don't suggest that in 3 days we're going to resolve all the grave threats to the Arctic, but feel free to prove me wrong on that. I do suggest, however, that we have in the tent the wisdom and the expertise to enhance how we inform policy with knowledge. So if we advance our ability to work together as policymakers, Indigenous peoples, and scientists, we will carry forward our shared values. I wish we could be having this conference in the tundra, but we are here for a number of reasons in this peculiar tent. Thanks to the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine, and we greatly appreciate their hospitality. For those who have journeyed from the tundra, gathering here is especially burdensome in terms of travel and the challenges of navigating what might be an uncomfortable environment. It's plenty hot out there today. The conference organizers, therefore, especially want to thank the Indigenous Participation Working Group for their hard work recruiting Indigenous participants. Moreover, the working group is determined to ensure that Indigenous participants are as comfortable as possible in this tent. The working group members have a special ribbon on their name tags, as do the members of the organizing committee and the ARCIS staff. If you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to ask us for assistance. Many others, of course, were essential to planning and executing this conference. The National Science Foundation and our other generous funders and partners are listed on page 3 of your program book. If you encounter representatives from any of those organizations, please thank them. And speaking of encountering people, we ask you to make a special effort to introduce yourself to people you don't know. Ask them why they're here. Tell them why you're here. Let's remember Conrad Oziva's wise counsel to that Savunga student. Learn from one another and different knowledge systems. And to that end, the conference structure is intended to maximize your opportunity to learn from experts you might not otherwise encounter and to share your expertise. We have endeavored to find a balance between presentations and time for conversation and discussion. The organizing committee and the working groups labored very hard to find just the right balance, and in the end, we realized there is no perfect balance. Our imperfect compromise includes urging presenters to avoid jargon and specialized language, having the sessions all in this room so you don't have to choose between competing sessions, minimizing the number of panelists and the duration of their presentations, thereby maximizing time for questions and discussions, and soliciting posters for much of the detailed information that would be very time-consuming in spoken presentations. So there are, in fact, nearly 200 excellent posters that you'll be able to see over the next 3 days. They'll be up for all 3 days. And the presenters will be answering questions at assigned times, and you'll hear more about that later this morning. During the presentations in this room, you can submit questions via the online tool Slido. Instructions for connecting to the internet and Slido are on page 4 of your program book. But if you do not have or care to use a device connected to the internet, you can also write questions on index cards, which will be passed around by staff. Pass them to the end of your row, and staff will collect them and see to it that they get entered into the Slido queue. There are alumni of the Students on Ice program in the tent, and they are happy to help collect those questions and get them entered into Slido. All of the spoken presentations will be in this auditorium, marked labeled number 7 on the map of the building on the back of your agendas. The posters will be viewed in the lecture room, West Court and East Court, numbers 4, 5, and 6. Box lunches and the evening receptions will be in the Great Hall, that's number 3. And Arcus has put signs in the hallways to help direct you to these other rooms. For safety's sake, please be aware that there are 6 emergency exits from this floor, including the door you came in from Constitution Avenue, and 5 others. The success of this conference, of our ability to carry forward our shared values, depends on listening well. We are trying to create a space in this tent where everyone feels safe to share what they know and believe. And for that, we need your help. Part of that is listening with care and respect and openness. Another part is being courteous to the speakers. Please make a special effort to be in your seats for the beginning of each session on time. And for moderators and speakers, please keep to your time out of respect for the speaker that comes after you. Well, finally, being safe and exchanging knowledge doesn't have to all be work. We can and should have some fun. I learned a lot of science from my mentor of many years, Bud Fay. Bud was a pretty damn serious scientist, but he was not above laughing at himself. I recall him describing one of his earliest trips learning about sea ice from hunters at Gamble, Alaska. They were traveling by skin boat in thin ice, and as the ice got thicker and thicker and the boat could no longer advance, the hunters, one after another, rolled over the bow and onto the ice. And Bud thought, okay, well, that's what I'll do. So he did the same thing and got there, and they all spread out around the boat and grabbed the gunnel at a different point. And Bud's thinking, yeah, I really got this down. I'm really learning this. And so they slid the boat along for some time like that. And then suddenly, Bud felt the boat breaking through the ice. And his instinct was to lift up. But at that same moment, the hunters all leaned from the waist over the gunnel and rolled back into the boat. So Bud said, in that instant, I managed to use the weight of the boat and those hunters to shove myself through that thin ice. And he found himself hanging from the gunnel, looking up at 6 faces laughing hysterically. So I suggest that we have some fun and humility as we're about the serious work that has brought us together.